They were soldiers unlike any others, before or since. Their nation was an armed camp. They knew no trade but war. In 480 BC, at a place called Thermopylae, they met an army 100 times their size and stood their ground. For them, the trumpets never called retreat. Their name has become a synonym for hardship willingly endured and death stoically faced.
If the city of the Spartans should be deserted, and nothing left but its temples and foundations, posterity would, I think, after a long lapse of time, be unwilling to believe that their power was as great as their renown.
There are few monuments left to the mightiest state in ancient Greece. For the Spartans were defended not by walls, but by their warriors.
A city well fortified, surrounded by brave men, and not by bricks.
Early in the 5th century BC, the Spartan defenses were put to their hardest test yet. The Persian king Xerxes, who ruled the greatest empire in the world, schemed to make it greater still by conquering the city-states of Greece. Invaders had long been drawn to the fertile valley of the Spartans, just as the Spartans themselves were centuries before. They were shielded, however, by their mountains and the sea. The true menace to Sparta lay within. Helots, they were called, captives. They were here before the Spartans, and they outnumbered them. But now the Helots toiled like sharecroppers. When a terrible earthquake shook Sparta, the Helots rose up. The revolt took several years to quash. Ever since, the Helots were kept in check by Sparta's soldiers, who went among them to kill the disloyal. Hostile to outsiders, fearful at home, Sparta was a regime like no other in history. Forever under the cloud of war, the entire nation lived like an army.
We have been superior to all the Greeks, not because of the size of our city, nor the numbers of our men, but because the constitution we have established is like a military camp, well administered and rendering willing obedience to its officers.
When the Persians marched on Greece, Sparta and its rivals ceased fighting among themselves. A small force, including 300 Spartans, was dispatched to hold off the Persians while the city-states organized. Among them, a warrior named Aristodemus. Like the others, he had prepared all his life for war, beginning at birth. Upon entering the world, a Spartan infant was examined by the city's elders. If it was not healthy and sturdy, it would be flung into a ravine on Mount Aegatus, and left to die. Surviving his first trial, Aristodemus was bathed not in water but wine to steel his constitution. Then he was handed over to a slave nurse. He would not be coddled. He was fed plain food and taught not to fear the dark or being alone. At 7, Aristodemus was enrolled in the state school, the Agoge. His life was now devoted to war.
Of reading and writing, they learned only enough to serve their turn. All the rest of their training was calculated to make them obey commands well, endure hardships, and conquer in battle.
The young Aristodemus was forbidden underclothes and shoes. Instead, he received a single cloak to last the whole year. During exercise, he went barefoot and naked. He was given no bed. He had to make his own from coarse rushes, plucked and twisted by hand. His diet was deliberately poor. To supplement it, he was encouraged to steal food, for someday his life might depend on living off the land. But if caught, he was beaten, first by the owner he had stolen from, then by his tutor for getting caught. At 12, Aristodemus began training with weapons: the sword, the thrusting spear, and the bulwark of the Spartan army, the shield. It was a simple metal disc hammered over a wooden core. The warrior passed his left arm through a loop to a grip on the rim. A line of soldiers so protected formed a phalanx, a wall of shields, where the right side of each man was protected by the shield of the man beside him. So important was it that warriors were told to come back with their shields or on them. At 20, Aristodemus faced another rite of passage, the privilege of joining a mess.
The messmates contributed monthly a bushel of barley meal, 8 gallons of wine, 5 pounds of cheese, 2.5 pounds of figs, and a very small amount of money for such relishes as flesh and fish.
For a Spartan warrior, belonging to a mess was not only a symbol of status, it was status itself. A man without a mess was like a soldier without an army. Still, the mess itself was as austere as the Spartans. A visiting foreigner thought the food so bad that he is said to have remarked, "Now I know why the Spartans do not fear death." In the mess and the barracks, bonds were forged that could not be broken on the battlefield. Training together, eating together, sleeping together, comrades became friends and lovers. No greater glory could a man seek than to die in battle for the one he loved. Aristodemus could now also take a wife, but marriage would not change his routine.
After supping at his public mess table as usual, he slipped stealthily into the room where his bride lay, loosed her virgin's robe, and bore her in his arms to the marriage bed. Then, after spending a short time with his bride, he went away to his usual quarters, there to sleep alongside the other young men.
Only at age 30 did Aristodemus reach the last stage of Spartan education. He was now an equal. For the rest of his life, an equal devoted himself to affairs of state and the art of war. He could choose to live with his family if he had one, but he could not farm or trade. Such work was left to others. The result, An army that could outdrill, outmarch, and outfight any other. Thermopylae means gates of heat. Here, where the mountains reared up from the shore, a hot sulfur spring flowed. In time, the sea would ebb and expose a plain nearly a mile across. In the days of Aristodemus, Thermopylae was a narrow pass, wide enough for only a single cart. Through this bottleneck, Xerxes would have to march. It was blocked by the Spartans. Xerxes sent out a spy. All he discovered was the Spartans' scorn for their enemy and for death. They stood in the open, conspicuous in their red cloaks and confident in their arms.
There he saw some of the men at exercise and others combing their hair. Marveling at the sight, he rode back, unmolested, none pursuing him or even paying him any attention. When Xerxes heard, he could not comprehend the truth, that the Spartans were preparing to the best of their power to kill or be killed. What they were doing seemed laughable.
Xerxes commanded a huge army, 200,000 strong. Such a host, he imagined, would sweep the Greeks aside. He didn't know the lay of the land or the way of the Spartans. They could not only outdrill and outmarch their foes, they could outmaneuver them. Spartans fought in platoons of 24 men called sworn bands. Small, mobile, and fiercely loyal. Aristodemus would serve in the same band throughout his career. At 55, he would retire, and a new man would take his place. For this family of comrades, each man was sworn to fight and die. Girding for battle, Aristodemus armored his torso with a bronze cuirass. His shins were guarded by bronze greaves. Strapped to his waist, an iron sword with a curved blade, wider near the tip, where it pierced flesh. Their heads were better protected than most warriors by a crested bronze helmet that exposed only the eyes. Beneath it, their long hair spilled out, a privilege of veterans and a sign of prowess. Deployed in the first rank of the phalanx, Aristodemus lifted his short spear over his shoulder, locked shields with his comrades, and advanced.
Shield against rounded shield, and awful shrieks as they fall upon one another, piercing men's breasts with the spear. And not a bit will they draw back from the pounding of the missiles. Nay, despite the battering of great hurlstones, the helmets shall abide the rattle of war unbowed.
In the narrow pass of Thermopylae, the Persians lost their great advantage in numbers. Fighting in shifts, Thrusting their spears from behind their wall of shields, the Greeks repelled assault after assault. Enraged, Xerxes sent in his elite infantry, the Immortals. The Spartan king Leonidas ordered the unthinkable: retreat. The Persians swarmed into the pass, and the trap. At a signal, the Spartans turned. Against the spears of the Spartan phalanx, the Immortals proved as weak as their flesh. For 2 days, the huge Persian army was held at bay. Then its luck turned. A farmer revealed a path through the mountains. Part of Xerxes' army poured through it and emerged behind the Greeks. The position of Leonidas was now hopeless. He ordered his Greek allies to retreat. With his 300 Spartans, he would stand at Thermopylae against the entire Persian army and hold them off for as long as possible. In admiration, 700 troops of the city-state Thespiae stayed to fight alongside the Spartans. After the second day of battle, Aristodemus and another Spartan, Eurytus, had taken ill. Leonidas had ordered them to rest, but now the Persians were closing in.
Eurytus called for his armor and put it on. But Aristodemus's heart failed him, and he stayed behind. They now met their enemies outside the pass, and many of the barbarians were slain. Many were thrust into the sea and there drowned, and more by far were trodden down bodily by each other, none regarding who it was that perished. For inasmuch as the Greeks knew that they must die by the hands of those who came around the mountain, they put forth the very utmost of their strength against the barbarians in their recklessness and frenzy.
In the thick of battle, King Leonidas fell. The fiercest fighting now took place for his body. Their spears and their ranks at last broken, the Greeks withdrew to a hill for a final stand.
In that place they defended themselves with their swords, as many as still had such, and with their fists and teeth, till the barbarians overwhelmed them with missiles. Thus did the men of Sparta and Thespiae bear themselves.
All but 2 of the Spartans lay slain. The poet Simonides composed an epitaph for the Spartan dead.
O stranger, go tell the Spartans that here we lie, obedient to their laws.
One warrior did not lie there, Aristodemus. For a Spartan, this was the worst fate.
When Aristodemus returned to Sparta, he was dishonored. No Spartan would give him fire, nor speak with him. And they called him, for his disgrace, Aristodemus the coward.
The time bought by the Spartans was well spent. When the Persians again met the Greeks in the great naval battle at Salamis, they were destroyed. Xerxes' dream of conquering Greece went down with his ships. Aristodemus was a broken man. Fighting a year later at Plataea, he plunged into the enemy line and ended his misery. For the next century, Sparta was the most powerful state in all Greece. In 404 BC, it defeated its proud arch-rival, Athens. But for the inflexible Spartans, new lands proved easier to win than to rule. The state as armed camp, an idea that worked so well at home, failed abroad. By the 2nd century BC, Sparta was broken. The discipline that kept its soldiers from fleeing in panic also prevented wise retreat. Militant Sparta had made too many enemies and lost too many men. Sparta's great training system, the agoge, was reduced to spectacle.
The boys in Sparta are lashed with whips during the entire day at the altar of Artemis or Thea, frequently to the point of death. And they bravely endure this, cheerful and proud, vying for the supremacy as to which could endure being beaten for the longer time and the greater number of blows. The one who is victorious is held high in repute.
This was the legacy of the once proud Spartans.